Welcome, everyone, to Aspen Ideas. I'm Sara Eisen from CNBC. It's great to be here with two esteemed CEOs. We've got Ramon Laguarta, the CEO of PepsiCo, and Enrique Lores, the CEO of HP. And the title of this session is, there's leading with purpose and leading with purpose. It's about a purpose-driven corporation, something like that. But anyway, I've wanted to get these two CEOs together on stage, not just because they are both purpose-driven leaders for a long time, but because they actually went to the same business school in Spain at different times. Who's older?
I think Ramon. But only 1 year, so almost the same.
Did you overlap? Did you know each other in business school?
No, we didn't.
No, but you figured it out later.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's great to have you guys both here. Did they teach, Ramon, did they teach purpose in business school?
Not at that time. But I think the values that they gave us, yes. So obviously now you combine your values with what's going on in the world, and then you have a company that is a company with purpose. But I think, they grew us in the values of societal development and building economic value through developing society. So that was part of the curriculum. We then go as deep as they do today with the topics of purpose and sustainability, et cetera. That was not part of the...
And it was definitely not called this way 30 years ago when we went to school.
Yeah, I mean, being a CEO in 2022 is very different than 30 years, 10 years ago, right? Enrique, how do you think about the responsibilities?
I think we need to balance the business objectives that we have with the purpose objectives that we have. And we need to do both because both are needed, and it's the best way also to have a stronger company. But we constantly need to balance both and make sure we make progress on both fronts.
What about you, Ramon?
Well, I wasn't CEO 10 years ago, so I don't know. But clearly...
CEO in training.
I think clearly we are assessed differently today, where it's not only about creating economic value, it's creating societal value. And I think starting with our associates, they're clearly looking at us like, are you guys creating full value? Our consumers are starting to look at this in some parts of the world, our shareholders, our board for sure. So clearly we're accountable to many more things than just creating economic value. To me, there were two aha moments as I was thinking about this over the last 4 or 5 years. One is when you realize the scale of your company, right? When you think about the scale that you have, and you think, okay, I can impact society much more than many companies around the world. You think about, we have 300,000 people, we operate in 200 countries, we have 50,000 farmers. So you say, wow, I can really create a lot of societal progress through my company, right? So that you talk to your people, and your people engage with that journey. So that's the first aha moment. The second aha moment is when you say, okay, this is not going to be just a nice thing to do, but it's going to be how we win in the marketplace. And that is the big strategic pivot that I think a lot of companies are starting to think through. How is not like the sustainability team doing things on the side or the corporate responsibility teams, but how your marketing teams, your procurement teams, your manufacturing teams, they see this as the way we're going to win in the marketplace, right? And that is a fundamental pivot that when a lot of companies are able to do that, I think we're going to have an acceleration on a lot of the transformation that we need in the world.
How do you make that shift culturally and from an organizational standpoint?
It is not easy, I must say. We launched Pep Positive. That you remember we had this. Pep Positive for us, for guys that don't know, is an end-to-end transformation of the way we do everything in the company, from agriculture to supply chain transformation, but most importantly, how we want our brands to talk to consumers around the world. And we talk to 1 billion consumers every day. So 1 billion people buy our products globally every day. That's a massive opportunity for impact. So we had to convince our marketeers, we had to convince our plant managers, our country managers, the people that go to the farm to do the farming, to change and to see the value in doing things differently. We're 2 years into the journey. I would say I have maybe 70% of my people that understand that we're going to win 20 years from now if we do this, otherwise we're going to lose. But it's a journey. It's a lot of intervention, a lot of communication, a lot of inspiration, a lot of town halls, a lot of effort. Yeah.
How did that journey unfold for you at HP? Because I think of you also as putting this at the core of what you do.
I think it all starts by declaring this not as an independent initiative, but it's really becoming a critical part of how we run the company. It is one of the key business objectives. Also because, as Ramon was saying, we believe that this is going to become one of our key competitive differentiators. We are convinced that in the future, consumers will want to buy products from brands that are doing the right things. Businesses want to buy products from brands that will help them to make their own sustainability goals. And this is why it's going to be so important, not only because of the impact this will have in the world, also because it will make us a stronger company, it will make us a more competitive company. So we have defined this as one of our business goals. Everybody has a sustainability goal as part of the work that they do. So when we talk to the engineering teams, how do we design the PCs, they need to use sustainable materials. They need to reduce every time the energy that we consume in our products. When we design our manufacturing layout, sustainability is part of how we design products to make sure we minimize the consumption of energy, for example. And when we review businesses, this is one of the key things that we review. So making it part of the company engine. We are an engineering company, and an engineering company means you have metrics and goals that you review periodically. This is one of the key metrics we review across every business of the company.
You know, talking about the environmental piece for sustainability, where you both sort of went with this, you know, I think of I think of PepsiCo, you know, the plastics problem, the food waste problem, HP, the paper and the ink cartridge. I mean, neither seems like a very sustainable business. Is that why you realized you had to do something to be a force for good instead of the opposite?
Yeah, I think as you're saying, the consumer is starting to pivot, and that clearly is a catalyst for change. Now, so if you think about Lay's, for example, one of our large brands, right? The way we're thinking about Lay's versus the Lay's we have today. Lay's, and it's not going to be like 10 years from now. It's going to be 3-4 years from now. We're working on a Lay's that is grown on regenerative farming practices. So land, and we grow Lay's in almost 100 countries around the world. So regenerative agriculture, and we're influencing all the farmers that work for us to change their practices. Then this will be cooked in a factory that uses zero water. So the water, we have plants that use now zero water. So the water is, you know, it's permanently there.
What do you use instead of water?
Sorry?
What replaces water?
No, the water, we
just
just reuse the water.
Oh, you reuse it.
So, you know, so we wash the potatoes, we have some processes so the water stays there. Now, this product will be packed in a biocompostable bag, right? So we're working on biocompostable packaging for Lay's. Transported, hopefully, in electric vehicles. That is, I would say, one of the big question marks. Can we do this in a short term or not? And then the consumer will, you know, the way we want to talk about the consumer is about all this with the lowest sodium level. So we want, the WHO has said very low levels for sodium. We want to make sure that our Lay's is below that. You put this together, you talk to your people, and you say, okay, now let's talk to the consumer. This is the new Lay's, right? And this is how we're starting to talk. We're activating in the UK, even here in the US. We're giving the consumers, connecting through the pack, they can see which farm grew those potatoes that were in the bag, and who is the farmer that grew those potatoes, and what are the practices that farmer used. So we're educating consumers on something that is critical for the future of the world, which is having a very different agriculture, avoid deforestation, land degradation, the use of fertilizers, tilling, and a lot of the practices that we do that are deteriorating. So we see our role as changing the farmer, but at the same time educating the consumer, you know, in that connection, and making sure the consumer eventually one day, and we hopefully with our marketing power, we can convince them soon to make choices around things that are, or products that are good for people and good for the planet. And that is the strategic growth ambition that we have as a company. We have the same for Gatorade. You think about Gatorade, we want to move it to powders, and we want to move it to personalized solutions for each one of you on hydration. So clearly eliminating some of the negatives, as you said, and turning that into positives and making sure the consumer understands the choices they can make that will make a difference to the world. Yeah?
And I think the way we look at it is, we look at the areas where we have the highest impact as sources of innovation, as sources of differentiation. For example, you mentioned plastics and paper. In the case of plastics, we are one of the biggest consumers of plastic because of what we use in our printers, what we use in our PCs, what we use in our cartridges. We have made a commitment to use recyclable plastic. And for example, today, in more than 80% of our PCs, we are using recyclable plastic. And we are the only company that has made that commitment and that is making that progress. Everybody also associates printing with trees, and if I print, I'm cutting a tree, and therefore I'm bad for the environment.
Is that wrong?
What we have decided is that we are going to be forest positive, and printing with HP is forest positive printing. And the commitment we have made is we are able to calculate how much paper is used in our printers. And based on that, we also know how much of this paper is coming from sustainable forests. So we have a whole program to drive reforestation to compensate for whatever paper is being used that is not coming from sustainable forest. So at the end, really is about using those weaknesses to identify how we can have a positive impact in the way our customers are using our products.
You're pet positive and he's tree positive.
Yeah.
That's good. But
I use his paper, so
must be the business school. Must be the same teacher. How do you make sure, Enrique, that it's not greenwashing, which is kind of a yucky term that's gained popularity, and there's increased scrutiny, I would say, on everything ESG, but especially around the environment. Like, should it be regulated? How should these metrics be measured, and how can you be held accountable, and how can we make sure what you say you're doing, you're actually doing, and that it's effective?
I think transparency is critical, and we have been publishing our sustainability report for the last 21 years because we think it's very important that if we make commitments, we make sure that we show progress. And we have been strong advocates for the creation of some standard reporting rules that everybody will have to follow to make sure that we, consumers and investors, could compare those that are doing the right things, those that are committing and making progress versus those that are just making statements, and really it's hard to know whether progress is happening or not. So I think transparency is the critical thing. Is
there a role for a regulator? Should the SEC look into company statements and go after companies that misrepresent these kind of goals?
There's eventually going to be some sort of legislation. I think Europe is moving faster. The US is moving as well. We're trying to, obviously, as global companies, ideally have one way of reporting this, but I don't think we'll get there. But, voluntarily, you've been publishing your sustainability report. We've been publishing our sustainability report. It's very detailed. It shows our efforts, our progress, and our vulnerabilities as well. It shows where we're not making good progress. I mean, not everything is perfect. We're trying to move recycling in the US. You probably live here in the US. You know how difficult it is to do recycling in this country. It is education, it is infrastructure, it is economic models. So we're trying to invest, and so when we publish our reports, we show great progress maybe on upskilling our people and diversity. We show great progress on regenerative agriculture. We show less progress on plastics, great progress on net zero. So we want to make sure that we put that out there. We will get some criticism, but at the same time, hopefully we get also some positive reinforcement that what we're doing is good. No? And that is, I think we need to learn as companies to not see any criticism as negative, but to see it also as a positive enforcement to do more. And I think the receivers of the reports need to see this not only as, oh, you guys haven't met all your metrics, but, oh, you're making great progress on 90% of your metrics. That's pretty good. No? It's almost like when your son comes home and he has a few B's and a lot of A's. You can focus on the B's or you can focus on the A's and encourage him. I think that kind of
so your parenting style is to focus on the A's.
Sorry?
So your parenting style is focus on the A's.
No, I mean, listen,
I would not.
We raise the bar every day with our people and with ourselves, but this sense of vulnerability, I mean, I think in this progress of what is huge transformations for society and for the companies, we're not going to get it right 100%. We're not going to get it right on the amount or on the timing, but we're going to move our companies forward big time. I think that's, you know, perfection is the enemy of progress sometimes. Yeah.
What about regulations? Do those work where you have?
I think they work.
Banning plastic straws, banning chemicals in your production.
We have examples on regulation, for example, in the area of sugar reduction. Very good regulation that help us pivot the category to non-sugar. Like in the UK, for example, they put a taxation that was a threshold, three layers of taxation. We moved the category together with Coca-Cola together. We moved the category from being 85% full sugar to 95% non-sugar in 5 years, like a massive pivot. We were able to give the consumer the incentives, pricing, space in the store, everything else. We think, regulation helps. Regulation helps setting the baseline for all the companies that compete in that particular category, make progress forward.
Do you agree with that, Enrique?
I do. In fact, for example, you were asking about the SEC. We have been supporters of the need to have some regulation that every company will have to follow. I think that regulation needs to be simple enough to not to become too complicated, but clearly some regulation is going to be needed. And I think building also on the point Ramon was making before, this transparency and vulnerability is not only important externally, it's also important internally. Our employees care about the progress we're making in this space. More and more is becoming a way to attract talent to the company, because again, in the same way you want to buy products from companies that do the right thing, people want to work for companies that are doing the right thing. And they need to be able to believe that this is true. So transparency and credibility are critical also in that perspective.
There's one area, I think, and it's, again, related to the plastics. In Europe today, because Europe has been regulating plastic and waste collection for many years, there's what is called extended producer responsibility schemes in many markets. The amount of waste that gets recycled in Europe is massive. In Europe, 100% of our packaging is recycled. You know, so we have 100% recycled PET in most of all Western Europe. Now we're trying to bring this to the U.S. I think the U.S. needs to embrace some of this legislation to have extended producer responsibility. Colorado passed the law just recently, a major accomplishment. Now, as an industry, we're trying to influence, we're trying to regulate, so that we have the funds to invest in infrastructure, to invest in consumer education. So hopefully we can get the U.S. to the levels of Europe. There's no reason why the U.S. should be lower than Europe in terms of recycling.
Why can't you just do it?
Sorry?
Why can't you just do it?
Well, we have to do it as an industry because there's a lot of infrastructure building. Right? We need to have collection points. We need to have all the infrastructure, sortation, collection, and eventually recycling, right? So this has to be done as a group together with the government. But in Europe, we've done it mostly, the consumer goods companies. So, but again, to the point, I don't want to go into a lot of details, but how regulation can help move the ecosystem, the full ecosystem, and how we as companies, we want this kind of playing field so that the money is directed to the right places. No? Yeah.
It's probably also one way to differentiate those companies that are really trying to do it versus those that have just goals and internally things are not happening. Because if you are doing the right things, you welcome regulation because it helps to have, as Ramon just said, a level playing field.
Who's your biggest competitor? Dell? Are they not?
On the PC is Dell, on printing, Canon or Epson.
They're not as good as you on this.
We are much more focused than other companies in this space.
Is Coke?
Coke is pretty good.
But not better than you.
No, there are some areas pre-competitive where I think the industry is working together. And I think this is another, when you were saying about what has changed in CEOs, I think CEOs of today, we look at certain areas of the ecosystem where we're making progress for the industry and certain areas where we compete like crazy. I mean, like we really have very aggressive competitive, when it comes to customers and consumers. When it comes to this kind of a more societal and moving the industry to the next level, we work together. That was not in the past. And I think, I mean, there is collaboration, there is thinking forward. We're thinking about the industry 20 years from now. We'd love for this industry to be non-sugar, et cetera. On the food industry as well, we want, we're reducing sodium massively. We're working on agriculture together with Nestle and some other food companies. This is land is a nature-based impact. I mean, I can work on potatoes, they can work on other ingredients. Together, we can impact that particular piece of land, no? Indonesia or Malaysia or Cote d'Ivoire, whatever. So we need to do it together.
It's true. I did get you on stage with the CEO of Coca-Cola on plastics at Davos a few years ago. So that was was indicative of that. Enrique, you said a lot of this is because your employees expect this of you. They want this of you to be better corporate citizens, and that extends to what you say too and your values. How do you tackle issues like Roe v. Wade, which are very, very divisive in this country, very controversial, very split and political? What do you say? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so we are very thoughtful about the process we follow to decide when to speak or not to speak. And we look at three key things. First, we look at the company values and make sure that we speak up when whatever the topic is aligned to our values. Second, we look at our employee base and we check how relevant this is for the employee base that we have. And the third thing we look at is how much impact can we have as a company. As Ramon was saying before, as a company, we're a community, but we are also a platform that can influence the society in many different ways. So we tend to speak up in those areas where we think we can have a stronger impact. In the case of what happened last week, our position has been very clear for several months since all this started and has not changed. We believe that each of our employees have the right to decide who to marry with, when to start a family, and we have been very clear that this is a decision that we think employees need to have. Second, we have made sure that our coverage plans cover broadly the needs that our employees need, whether are procedures that need to happen in state or out of state. And we have been very clear with our employees that this is the position that the company have. We have made it clear both internally and externally because we think it is aligned with our values, relevant to our employees, and we can have an impact.
Is there anything beyond that you can do? Is there any activism? Is there any, do you take, besides just a statement?
It depends on the topic. In the areas where we think we can have an impact, we do. In others, we just do that by really protecting the needs of our employees.
How do you think about it, Ramon?
Yeah, very similarly. I mean, the principles we have, and this is discussed with the board and the leadership team, and similar, the three principles that Enrique was saying. Now, I see this, there are areas where there's one level of decision on what we talk and what we don't talk, and there's another level of decisions where we act and we don't act, which I think is different, right? So, for example, I'll give you a few examples where we acted differently. The George Floyd death and what happened there. Clearly, we were extremely vocal externally, and we were very active internally, and we created a full program for racial equality, both for African Americans and for Hispanics. We've been very vocal. We're acting on it. Representation, business impact, community impact. Clearly, so vocal and active. Voting rights. We decided not to act externally, not to talk externally, but we decided to be very active internally, make sure that our processes, our time, we gave our employees education, we gave our employees, pay time to go vote, make sure that they could exercise their right to vote with no restrictions. And that's how we acted on that one.
But did you lobby for anything? Or?
We didn't lobby for anything. We didn't lobby for anything. We lobbied for democracy, for the right to vote, for sure. When it comes to the details of the different voting rights in the different states, we thought it was not an area where we had to be vocal. However, we think we have to be super active in making sure that we create an environment for all our associates to go and vote and actually encourage them to vote, right? So give them the education, why they should vote, why is this important. Now, on the abortion case, the same. We decided not to be super vocal externally, but same as Enrique, we have, we're really taking care of the physical and mental well-being of our employees. Our health, insurance benefits are super generous, and we will make sure that they have the opportunity to do what they need to do based on their own preference. Just to give you a context, we have 300,000 employees globally, 120,000 in the US. A lot of them, low social levels, medium social levels, working in the factories, working in warehouse, working in agriculture, whatever. Very different ideologies, right? We talk to 1 billion consumers a day. You can imagine globally. You can imagine the different ideological positions of those consumers. Our shareholders is basically everybody. Like everybody, one way or another, owns a little bit, small part of PepsiCo. We're a $250 billion market cap. So whatever I say can be interpreted very differently by different people. So I'm very conscious where I talk versus where I act. I lean on the action versus the talking because I know that I can generate a lot of unintended consequences. There are some areas, as Enrique was saying, core values of PepsiCo where I'm going to be super vocal. Other areas, I think leaning with action and making sure that our employees, our associates are protected and well covered is the way I should act.
I'm sort of torn on this because obviously it makes sense and you don't want to alienate any of your customers or your employees. But on the other hand, as Mark Benioff says, business is the greatest platform for change. And you do have a voice and you do have an ability in a very polarized government and society to actually affect the way things go. Look what happened with the gender bathroom in North Carolina. So I guess I'm wondering, is politics a risky business or productive for business?
I think in fact we have a voice, and for example, when we have taken position, when we took position last week in the abortion case, you see that difference in what employees believe, because this is clearly a very divisive area. And what I do in many cases when I get messages from employees really saying, I'm totally against this, I don't understand why this is a company value, it's totally against my principles, I look for the phone in our system and I call. Because one of our values is also that everybody needs to have the right to believe, have different ideas, and be able to express them. And employees react like, are you really Enrique? Yes, I am. I want to understand your point of view. I want to hear what you have to say. It's not aligned to the direction of the company, but I want you to understand the direction of the company. I also want you to have the opportunity of sharing with me your view. And this changes the dialogue, because this is a way to really show that we, even if in some cases we are not aligned, we care about what the other people think. And then I learn some things many times in these conversations, and they also learn more about the position of the company and what is behind our position.
Yeah, I guess you don't want people to come after you, right? You don't want to be called woke. You don't want to get bashed on.
I think it's a bit more complex, Sarah. I think we can fall in the trap of thinking that what Ramon Laguarta thinks is what PepsiCo should think, and that is not true. And that is hard for us as individuals to decide. No? Like I'm very pro-liberal, and that was my education, and I have a very clear set of values. Are these the values of PepsiCo? Well, what is PepsiCo? PepsiCo is 300,000 employees, is 1 billion customers, is multi-billion shareholders. Like, and we struggle. This is an art, it's not a science, and we struggle with this. I mean, like very openly. And we have to talk to our board, and we have to talk to our leadership teams, and this is a very deep internal conversations that sometimes create a lot of personal tensions for us, right? Because we would do one thing, but we have to do another thing, because that's the best thing for the companies we run. I understand our roles as leaders that need to transform society. I like the point Enrique was saying, where does our opinion count or doesn't count? Because sometimes we think our opinion counts, but nothing happens. I mean, we can be out there only creating negative for our companies, but we don't make any social progress. So again, we don't agree on this topic between all of us here in the room. But again, we're learning. This is an art. Every topic, we analyze it through some principles, but at the end, the decision is always degrees of gray and never black or white.
So last one on this. So what about gun rights? Clearly that impacts our society. It impacts gun rights. Business very quiet. They don't stand up to the NRA. Why? That doesn't fit the criteria?
I think in this case, as we went through the discussion, it didn't fit the criteria. It doesn't mean that we, as Ramon was saying, I personally don't have a strong belief of what should happen. It doesn't mean that we don't encourage the legislators to come with some sort of rational laws that prevent what we have seen, the terrible things we have seen happening. But there are so many things to choose that we need to choose those areas where we think we are going to have an impact.
Yeah.
Fair.
I mean, for both of us as Europeans, you can imagine. I mean, we're totally against this, right? like really against. So don't take us wrong. But now, what do we do with it? Where is a public conversation versus a private conversation? You know, we need to choose the
We'll just keep it in this
the
private
most
conversation of Aspen Ideas.
Yeah. So we're being very open here.
And also, and Ramon mentioned it before, both of us represent global companies. And the issues that we are discussing are very US, and we both have strong businesses and presence in the US, but there are many similar issues in many countries of the world. And choosing when we speak forces us to be more selective, because if we are very aggressive in something in the US, we will get a call rightfully from our teams in India saying, we have this particular problem here and we don't hear your voice. Or in Israel, or it's another reason why being selective and really going after those things where you really can have an impact is important.
Diversity matters greatly to both of you. You both speak out on it a lot. You mentioned you came out after George Floyd. You're two of, I think, 16 Hispanic CEOs in the S&P 500. The numbers are just low and unrepresented across, right, management and corporate America. What do we do about that, Ramon?
Well, I think we need to. This is a systemic effort that we have to do. I mean, obviously, as internally, and I'm sure Enrique is the same. I mean, we have a lot of internal processes that we're adapting, like hiring processes or promotion processes, or coaching processes, or assessment. Like a lot of the processes have been pivoted to ensure that we have the right representation at the different levels of the company. Going forward, we're being very active in the communities. I think with our creating suppliers of diversity, either Hispanics or African Americans, farmers or African Americans and Hispanic suppliers for us in advertising agencies, or like different areas where we're trying to create wealth for them in the community. But at the end, I think the key strategic thing we have to do is education, education, and education. And that is where we're putting a lot of our efforts. How do we help African Americans, how do we help Hispanics have better education, believe in their possibilities, believe in their future? They don't even know what their potential is, right? When you grow in a immigrant family, a Hispanic family, that your parents have never been to college or even high school education sometimes, you don't know what you're capable of. And they're not encouraged in the family to get their education. That's where I think companies, we can help. And so we're helping a lot on grants. We're helping a lot on making sure that there's a pipeline of talent in this country that is well educated, that then and then we empower them to grow in the companies. We upskill them. We give them a lot of resources to be themselves and grow. That is the long-term journey. The short-term journey is a bit more tactical. Okay, how do you change some processes? We have to be more courageous in how we promote leaders early on without being perfect. So those are tactical things. The big thing is education, upskilling people, making them believe in their possibilities, and encourage them to. That is the big idea that we have. I think we can do it, but it's an ecosystem. It's really an ecosystem of effort.
Is it even harder for you being in technology with the skills?
I think it's similar in terms of all the changes that we need to drive inside the company, also on the education side, to make sure that we can really have a more equal workforce. Also, what I would add to what Ramon was saying, it also puts pressure on us as persons, because personally, and I'm sure Ramon will agree, we want other people to be able to fulfill the dream that we had. And by helping, participating, providing mentoring at the personal level, engaging in as many events as we can, I think it's something that we also do because in many cases it's about showing people that everything is possible. That if someone with our accents can be leading two of the most relevant companies in the world,
Iconic.
it's possible for many other people. And this is why we also need to play that role.
I think we're clear examples of how, you know, companies allow this kind of empowerment today. I mean, they've done it. I mean, otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And we come from humble families in different corners of a small country in the world, right? And we made it all the way to running, complex companies where it's clearly hard to get to the top. We use our examples a lot to make people believe, because sometimes it's not their education or it's their belief in themselves. That is something that we have to encourage people to really, you have tremendous capabilities. Go and do it. I mean, that is something that we're trying to create that environment in our company where we encourage people to take risky assignments, to go and educate themselves in things that they don't even think they can do. And then eventually they do it. People that are starting in warehousing, that eventually they can be, they work in engineering because we help them upskilling, they take them through college, and eventually they're engineers. And these guys started in like forklifts in the warehouse. Those are very powerful ideas that we're trying to make sure they're available to everybody in the company. We talk in the town halls. Believing in yourself is a huge, huge, huge asset.
Yeah, something we say internally in the company, and we apply both to the business but also to people development, is that imagination is your only limit. If you're able to dream where you want to go, and this is true for what products you need to build, but it's also true for our own careers. And that encouragement really makes a difference and is something that we constantly reinforce.
So all of these goals that we talk about, diversity and environmental and value, what happens to all of this if we go into recession? How do you prioritize, if we're in a mode where there's belt tightening and there's slowdown or pause in hiring or even layoffs, how do you think about these goals? And are we in that kind of environment, Enrique?
So I think that going back to the first question and the first conversation we had, this is not a separate initiative. In our case, this is a business imperative. We are going to continue design products that will fulfill the needs from our customers, and we think sustainability is one of the key needs. So for us, it's not so much about whether now we don't focus on this because we need to focus on making money. This is what is going to help us to be more competitive, to win more business, and also to be a better company. So we don't separate both, we put them together.
Same.
Yeah, listen, I think
I'll get back to you on the recession.
what we have to have clearly in our minds is what is the company we want 10, 15 years from now? Like, we have the North Star clear, then we have to make adjustments. But this assumption that a sustainable business is a more expensive business or less cost efficient business I think is wrong, at least in our case. And that's where I'm trying to kind of fight the potential mindset in our company, our people, that if we're having to make more cost interventions in the next few years, then we're going to have to stop some of this investment. That's wrong. I think a green company is not a more expensive company, and I'll give you some examples. For us, reducing sugar, it helps our P&L. So we're encouraging. For us to reduce lightweighting our bottles or changing to going to returnable bottles is a better economic system. So it helps. For us to reduce energy in the factories is great for the planet. It's great for our P&L. No, reduce water in the factories, great for the planet, great for our P&L. So there's a lot of things that we can do in our businesses that are resource constrained, good for the planet, and will help us in a potentially recessionary environment where, obviously we have to be tough with our costs. So I don't want to have this connection between a sustainable company is a less cost-effective company. I think we need to break this connection and actually can help us to be more cost efficient.
Are we going into a recession?
So the honest answer is, I don't know. And I
What do you
think
see in tech spending?
what we have learned is that, and given how volatile the environment is, we have learned during the last 2 years that it's less important to exactly know what is going to happen versus being ready for multiple scenarios. And this is how we have managed the company during the last 3 years and what we'll have to continue to do. I don't think anybody in the world is able to say whether we are going to have a mild recession, big recession, or if the economy is going to recover because something that nobody is expecting today will happen. What we need to do as leaders of our companies is being able to be ready to manage the company in whatever happens, and this is really where our focus is now.
But are you seeing a change in the environment? Are you seeing it show up in the business?
Well, what we see is the same things you see. We have seen, as we said in our last calls, consumer demand is weakening, inflation continues to grow. Where that this brings us, super hard to predict.
I know you're a little limited, you're in quiet period, but is there anything you want to say about the consumer environment?
I think obviously this huge inflation is going to hurt consumer and is going to force consumers to adopt some different strategies to make their budget work. Now, to your point on recession, I think Europe will have probably more impact than other parts of the world. I think Europe is hard right now. If you think about the energy costs, you think some of the food costs in Europe is going to be impacting the consumer and the business. I think the U.S. has much more healthy unemployment levels and economy at this point. So, to tell you the truth, I mean, we have labor challenges, right, in the U.S. We cannot fulfill our demand sometimes in our factories. So I think the U.S. probably has more chances of navigating through this with, maybe minor demand impact. But we have to slow down inflation for sure. That is something that is not healthy for us long term. Emerging markets, to my surprise, they're doing very well in terms of demand, especially Latin America is a part of the world that I think is getting a lot of money from the U.S. So there's a lot of money that is going down to Mexico and other, Central America from people that are working in the U.S., high levels of employment here, higher salaries. So that's helping their macroeconomics. I think Latin America, as companies, I guess, like Enrique, will onshore more, will leave China, bring more, bring more assets close to demand, closer to the U.S. Here I think Latin America is a positive place for the future. So different parts of the world, different realities, but I always see these economic cycles as, you go up, you go down. There has to be a much longer term strategy for the company that navigates those, economic cycles. But at the end, the companies that are able to transform themselves for the long term will win. And I think we need to run the companies for 15 years, 20 years out, and navigate the short term with tactical decisions that don't derail you much from the long term. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
We have 2 minutes, so I'd love to see if we have a question or two from the audience. I think we have one down here. You could just be quick so we can get a few.
Sure. My name's Claire, and I represent an organization that works with Gen Z millennial leaders, and I just really appreciate your clearly intentional leaders who are committed personally and organizationally to inclusion and sustainability. I am also encouraged to hear that you're listening to your associates and employees, and so I am curious about what do you see your responsibility in terms of our generation's growing concern around wealth and income gaps across the U.S. and globally? And again, what responsibility are you seeing both in the short term and long term to address that along with your other inclusion policies?
I was saying, I think climate change and wealth inequality are probably two of the biggest long-term challenges that we have as society, right? So we as companies need to work on both. So sustainability, planet, that's what we say. We care for the planet, we care for the people. The planet is, I think we talked about, the people, what I was trying to say earlier about diversity and upskilling our people, that's our responsibility. So education is one, but then upskilling them, and we're investing a ton, I'm sure you guys are, in making sure our people have the opportunity to upskill. And that is a massive opportunity. We create great jobs. They can take their sons through college, and daughters. I mean their children, and sorry, This is the English part. and that means that, you know, the next generation is much better than current. And that's how we think our job is, you know, our responsibility. But those are the two big problems: long-term wealth inequality and climate change. Those are huge problems that we need to tackle.
And in our case, we have talked about sustainability and diversity. The third leg of our strategy is digital equity, because we have seen that technology can really bring people together, but also can create significant differences. And because of the business that we are in, the products that we create, is one of our key objectives to really help use technology to drive more equity in the world.
I think maybe just one more. I know we're low on time, but if we could just do one more. Here. Sorry, we'll keep it quick. We went a little over.
We can repeat the question.
Yeah, really.
Hello, buenas tardes.
Hola.
My name is Jose Beteta. I'm along with Tamir Maldonado. We're the co-founders of Raíces Brewing Company in Denver, Colorado, a Latino-owned brewery. And we operate under 3 pillars: community, culture, and cerveza. And I wanted to know...
3 C's.
Yes, they're very real. Yes. I wanted to know, within your own companies, what is your favorite community program that your company runs?
We have a program that is called Pepsi Dig In, which we just started 2 years ago. And that is a program where we help African-American restaurants. And it was, you know, as a consequence of the pandemic that we wanted to help them, because they were pivoting to delivery, you know, they were not ready. So we are helping them. We're helping 15,000 restaurants across the US now, African Americans, to pivot to e-commerce and delivery. And that is doing amazing for us, not only on developing the owners, but the whole community. We're seeing growth in our market share. We're seeing growth in adoption of our brands because of what we're doing in African American communities, helping Black restaurants.
And we have an initiative called HP Live about showing people how to use technology to change their lives. And we have it in many African and Latin American countries, and it's having tremendous impact in really bringing people to use technology and to really use technology to have better companies and better lives.
We're way over time. I wanted to get that in. Thank you all for being here, and thank you especially to Enrique and Ramon.
Right.